Hey guys, welcome back to the UFC Insane channel, and today we're gonna be breaking down the biggest pay-per-view of the year, UFC 276, headlined by the middleweight champion Israel Adesanya, attempting to defend his title against the always dangerous Cannonier. Topped off with an amazing undercard, Alexander Volkanovski taking on Max Holloway for the third time to determine the greatest featherweight of all time for the featherweight title. We also have a number one contender fight between Pereira and Strickland to determine who is next for the middleweight title. We also have the superstar Sean O'Malley getting a step up in competition against Pedro Munhoz to determine if he is really ready for that next step of high level competition. Also, the main card, we have Robbie Lawler taking on Brian Bam Bam Barberina. Two brawlers ready to go at it for the fans. And Jalen Turner and Brad Riddell to solidify themselves as a prospect of the top 15 candidate for the lightweight division. And Cowboy Cerrone stepping up on short notice to take on Jim Miller to determine in a rematch who will have the most wins in UFC history. And let's break down that fight first. Cowboy Cerrone and Jim Miller have faced many years ago, with Cowboy Cerrone winning that fight by TKO. But recently, Jim Miller has been on a roll with 2 wins over Eric Gonzalez and Nicholas Mata, both by knockout. And Cowboy Cerrone has been struggling recently, with his last fight coming a year ago against Alex Morono, which he has lost by TKO. He has also faced plenty of other TKO losses, including against Conor McGregor and Justin Gaethje. But Donald Cerrone was supposed to face Joe Lozon a couple months ago, meaning he was in training camp for months for this fight. Not for this fight, for Joe Lozon. And he has cut a lot of weight to 155 twice in the last 2 months. I don't see that working out for him. Even though this fight is at 170, Jim Miller has showed his hands could get it done still. So I'm going to have to go with Jim Miller by round 1 TKO, but do not count out Cowboy Cerrone for a late rally. Next up, we're going to be heading to Jalen Turner and Brad Riddell to solidify himself as a legit prospect in the lightweight division and a top 15 prospect. Jalen Turner has been on a roll recently on a crazy finish streak, including finishes over the always dangerous Jamie Malarkey and Uros Medic. Brad Riddell, his last win comes against Drew Dober last year in a fight of the night, and his last fight was against Rafael Fiziev, which he took a crazy spinning wheel kick in, and I don't know if his chin will be all the way there. So I'm gonna have to go with Jalen Turner in this fight, and I'm gonna have to go with his pressure and pace carrying on into the second round, breaking down Brad Riddell, and I'm gonna have to go to second round TKO. Next up, we have Robbie Lawler taking on the always dangerous Bam Bam Barberina, Brian Barberina. Robbie Lawler has picked up a win finally from his last 5 fights and his last fight against Nick Diaz in a rematch. But he has looked pretty defenseless in his last fights against Colby Covington and Neil Magny, to name a couple. There's no shame in losing to those guys, but he would have done better earlier in his career. For Brian Barberina, he took on Mac Brown in a fight of the night contender in UFC Columbus, and earlier last year against Darian Weeks, both wins, both he picked up, so he's riding on some momentum. For my official prediction for this fight, I'm going to have to go with Brian Barberina. I think Robbie Lawler is going to be too defenseless late and early. The whole fight is going to be too defenseless. He's not going to get enough shots off, and Brian Barberina always brings out the pressure, brings out the pace. So I'm going to have to go with Brian Barberina by unanimous decision victory. Next, we head to the main fights, top 10 fights. We're going with Sean O'Malley against Pedro Munhoz to determine top 10 bantamweights and if Sean O'Malley can take that next step into higher competition. Sean O'Malley bounced back in 2021 with 3 great wins over Thomas Almeida, Chris Moutinho, and Raulian Paiva, all by TKO or straight knockout. So Pedro Munhoz himself, he's been on a decline recently, losing to fighters such as Jose Aldo and Dominic Cruz. Even though he's had his moments, such as dropping Cruz multiple times in their fight, he is still on a losing streak, looking slow and looking like he's not on that level. But he is always dangerous with his power and his submissions, showing in his fight against Cody Garbrandt, where he knocked out Cody out cold. So in my predictions for this fight, I think Pedro's going to have to chew up the legs of Sean O'Malley to win this fight. But Sean has the range, has the power, has the speed. So I'm going to go with Sugar Sean O'Malley. And Pedro's never been finished, so I'll go with Sugar Sean O'Malley by unanimous decision. Next up, we have the number 1 contender fight in the middleweight division. Alex Pereira, the only man to knock out Israel Adesanya, taking on Sean Strickland, the number 4th ranked middleweight. Alex Pereira, a kickboxing legend, has already made his mark in the UFC in his 2 first fights, knocking out Andreas Michailidis and dominating Bruno Silva over 3 rounds. Sean Strickland, on the other hand, has worked his way up and is on a great streak with wins over Jack Hermanson, Uriah Hall, and Krzysztof Jotko, to name a few. For this fight, I think Sean Strickland is going to have to use his wrestling, have to use grappling to wear down Alex Pereira. So for this fight, I think he will. I'm going to go with Sean Strickland not getting knocked out early. I think he'll survive the early onslaught and use his pressure and his pace against the cage on his grappling with his wrestling against Alex Pereira to pick up a unanimous decision win for Sean Strickland. Next up, we have one of 2 title fights to determine the greatest featherweight of all time. We have Alexander Volkanovski looking to defend his belt again against the Max Holloway. The first 2 fights were very competitive between these two, but Alexander Volkanovski used his leg kicks, used his inside game to disrupt Max Holloway's pace. But Max Holloway has had his moment. In the first fight, clearly losing. In the second fight, he made his adjustments, catching Alexander Volkanovski multiple times, dropping him multiple times, but still not doing enough to secure the victory in the judges' eyes. But in your last 2 fights, both have improved massively, with Alexander Volkanovski brutalizing Brian Ortega outside of a few submission attempts, and Alexander Volkanovski brutalizing Korean Zombie over 4 rounds before eventually getting a finish. Max Holloway absolutely demolished a top contender, a great fighter, and Calvin Kattar over 5 rounds, setting multiple records, multiple striking records, most strikes landed, most strikes attempted in a single fight, looking like he was on another level than any other featherweight. But in his fight against Yair Rodriguez, it was a fight of the year contender. Yair Rodriguez showed he could hang with Max Holloway, and both done lots of damage, it was a fight of the year contender, like I said. It really showed that both guys are still in there, both guys are tough, both guys have a great chin, both guys can hit hard, both guys can do it all. But I think this fight comes down to has improved more, and for me, that is Alexander Volkanovski. I think he'll use his leg kicks. Max Holloway wasn't really addressing them against Yair Rodriguez, and I think he'll win by unanimous decision, picking him apart from the outside. I think Max Holloway will have a few moments here and there, but I don't think it will be a whole blowout like what he's done with the Korean Zombie and Brian Ortega. But I think he'll pick up a comfortable 48-47, 49-46 decision win. Now on to the main event of the evening. We have Israel Adesanya trying to defend his belt against the great power puncher, Jared Cannonier. Israel Adesanya is trying to make the 5th defense of his belt, with wins over Yoel Romero, Paulo Costa, Marvin Vettori, and Robert Whittaker, all in title defenses. For Jared Cannonier, he's been on a roll ever since he's been in the middleweight division, picking up wins over Jack Hermanson, Kelvin Gastelum, and Derek Brunson to solidify himself as the number 1 contender. For me, I don't see this fight as a style that Israel hasn't seen before. He's seen the big power punchers such as Yoel Romero and Paulo Costa, and he's dealt with them well. He has a great chin from what we've seen in the Kelvin Gastelum fight, and I don't think Jared will be the one to crack it. So I'm going to go with Israel Adesanya, picking him apart from the outside, using those leg kicks at range, using his jab. He's way too long for these guys. He's going to use his teeth, going to use his kicks, keep Jared at range, and I think he'll pick up a unanimous decision win, maybe 50-45. I think he might drop Jared in one of the rounds, but I think it'll be another comfortable decision for the champ, and he'll retain his belt. He'll retain his belt comfortably. Thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video. leave your comments down below and your predictions for the fights tonight, or for your fights on Saturday, and let me know who you guys got in the whole main card. Thank you for watching and have a great day.